Hi guys, just a couple of quick things I wanted to take you through when you're working on your similarity review, just to make sure you understand exactly what to do so you can feel good for your upcoming quiz. So always read the directions. This says tell whether the triangles are similar or not, and if you can't reach a conclusion, just write that no conclusion is possible. Well, there are three ways to determine whether or not you have similar triangles. You can have similar triangles by what's called angle-angle similarity. So in your diagram, if you can find at least two pairs of corresponding angles that are congruent, this is what will justify whether or not you have similar triangles. Another way that you can determine whether you have similar triangles is by looking at all of the sides. That's called side-side-side similarity. So if you make ratios out of the smallest sides, the medium-sized sides, and the large sides, if all of those ratios are the same, then you can conclude just by the sides alone that you have similar triangles. Or you can use what's called side-angle-side similarity. So if you have a pair of angles that are the same or congruent, and the two sides that form that angle, if when you make ratios out of those sides, you get the same ratio, you can use side-angle-side similarity to justify that you have similar triangles. So these are yes or no questions. But if the answer is yes, make sure you give one of these three reasons for why you have similar triangles. The diagrams in 4 and 5 should look pretty familiar, so just make sure you do two things. Make sure you solve for x, and then separately, you need to solve for y. So, for instance, when you solve for x, you need to write your proportion, and then you need to solve it. So you need to do the same thing for y. Again, write the proportion and solve it. So question number 5 is just a little bit different. Here you need to make sure that you know how to name the similar triangles. So the triangle on the left has been named JKN. So using the markings, you need to figure out how to name the second triangle so that they correspond. Notice in part B, all you have to do is finish these proportions. So you need to finish the ratio. So what would compare to 15? And then correspondingly, what would compare to 18 in the other triangle? So all you're doing in B and C is finishing those proportions. There's nothing to solve. You're just making the proportions, making the comparisons. Then for X and Y, it's the same thing as we did over here. So for both x and y, you want to write a proportion and you want to solve for x. You want to write a proportion and solve for y. So basically, this process you're going to do 4 times at this part of the handout. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, questions 6 and 7 and 8, these use exactly the same strategies as questions 4 and 5. You want to write a proportion and you want to solve. But the key here is the first thing you have to do is label the diagram. So make sure you read the information that's given to you. So like number 6, to estimate the height of a pole. So here is the pole from G to F. Here is the pole. A basketball player exactly 2 meters tall. So right here, we have a 2-meter height right here for the basketball player, stood so that the ends of the shadows coincided. So here is the pole's shadow, and here is the basketball player's shadow. So here's the sun. Again, here's the pole, the shadow of the basketball player, so they coincide, they meet right here. So he found that the segment DE and the segment DF measure 1.6 meters and 4.4 meters respectively. So you need to label them. So DE is 1.6 meters. Here is DE. I'm going to put 1.6 meters. And then DF is 4.4 meters. So now look, from D to F, that's this entire distance right here. That's 4.4 meters. You're trying to figure out how tall the pole is, so call that X. So what I want you to realize about questions 6 and 7 and 8, the first thing you need to do is label the picture. Then you can write a proportion to solve for X. Write a proportion. Oops, you can't see what I'm doing, forgive me. Again, write a proportion and then solve for x. So it's the same thing on the other questions here. So on question number 7, notice you're given information about the length from L to F, the length from L to S, the height of the screen image. You're trying to figure out how tall the film image happens to be. So when you are labeling the film image, that's x. And you'll know how to write your proportion and how to solve for x once you label the diagram with the values that are given to you in the question. Same thing on question number 8. You want to find the width of the river from R to I. So I suppose if you wanted to, you could just call that x. Label the other parts. On your picture, you'll write a proportion and solve for x. So these questions 6, 7, and 8 are no different than questions 4 and 5. You just have to make sure you take the time to mark and label the diagram first, and then you'll be good to go. Hope this is helpful. Bring your questions to class.